Burgundia, a world of windswept plains, fortress keeps, and blood-bound vows, a world where feudal war is a way of life, and knighthood is not a privilege, it is a burden worn like a second skin. Upon this grim and noble soil was born a boy who would grow into one of the most storied warriors of the Dark Angels chapter. His name was Belial. He was born into the knightly society of the Ebon Star, son of the reigning magister Militum. His first breath was drawn in a chamber of iron and banners. Before he could walk, he was taught to kneel in prayer. Before he could read, he could recite the 10 maxims of warfare, each one etched into his bones with the stern instruction of his father's blade. The society did not raise children, it forged weapons. In the tournaments of the court, Belial was unmatched among the young. Even among men, he was spoken of in hushed tones. His footwork was clean, his strikes without waste. He fought as if war was his only language. By the age of 8, he had broken the arms of 3 older squires in mock combat, and was the youngest knight ever entrusted to bear the banner of the Ebon Star into ritual tourney. But the boy was not content with the legacy he stood to inherit. Though his house was proud and his position unassailable, Belial looked skyward. He watched the stars in silence, imagining greater wars, nobler causes, more righteous blades. And when the Dark Angels came, those silent, armored angels descending from the heavens, like the Emperor's own judgment, something in him stirred. A tournament was announced. As was tradition, every knightly order of Burgundia was invited to send their finest youth to compete for selection. The prize was eternal glory, a place among the Astartes. But Belial's father refused him. The Magister had no intention of allowing his only son to vanish into the stars. He forbade Belial from attending. The boy was destined to become the next lord of the Ebon Star, not a servant of some alien god of war. But Belial was already beyond such limits. In silence, he took the armor of a fallen knight, dented, unadorned, without insignia, and entered the tournament in secret. No banners, no lineage, only steel. The tournament grounds were held before the visiting chaplain of the Dark Angels, a towering figure in black and bone, flanked by silent serfs bearing scrolls of judgment. Dozens of nobles competed. Some came with golden heraldry, some with oaths as long as their swords. But it was the masked knight who stood out, not for appearance but for action. Fight after fight, Belial bested his foes with cold precision. He parried before they struck. He exploited every opening. He never gloated, never hesitated, never faltered. His sword was a whisper through armor, his movement a lesson in restraint. By the end of the trials, he alone remained standing, his armor stained with dust and triumph. The chaplain approached the victor. "Remove your helm," he said. The masked knight did not obey. "I cannot," Belial answered. "You must," the chaplain warned, "for the Emperor does not recruit phantoms." But the boy stood his ground. "Then let me prove myself with steel. Let me face you." A ripple passed through the crowd. To challenge a space marine, to suggest that an unaugmented human could endure a duel with one, was madness. But the chaplain, named Lamorak, did not laugh. He studied the boy in silence. Then he accepted. The duel that followed became the stuff of myth. It lasted 7 minutes. Belial moved with the fury of a storm and the discipline of a veteran. He parried blows that shattered stone. He landed strikes that would have brought down a lesser man. His helm was cracked, his shoulder dislocated. Still, he fought on. Only when the chaplain landed a final crushing blow, shattering Belial's sword and driving him into the dust, did the fight end. As Belial struggled to his knees, blood running from his temple, Lamorak reached forward and unsealed his helm. The gasps came instantly. "Belial," someone breathed. "The air." The Magister was in the crowd. His face was red with fury. "You defied me," he roared. "You disgrace your name." But Lamorak silenced him with a glance. "This boy," the chaplain said, "has earned more than your name. He has earned the Emperor's light." Against the protests of his father, Belial was taken. No time was given for farewells, no honors, no feast, no legacy to pass on. He left as he had entered, silent, masked, and carrying only his will. And so he departed Burgundia, not as a prince but as a supplicant, a boy no longer, a weapon in the making. The journey to the recruitment bastion was without comfort. The warp-touched prayers of the Astartes, the grinding of servitors, the cold steel of the gene labs, these became his new reality. His name was never spoken. He was called Initiate, then Neophyte, later Brother. The boy he had been, the Knight of Burgundia, was burned away with every implantation, every hour of hypno-doctrine and silent prayer. Yet the knight's spirit remained. When others collapsed from exhaustion, Belial trained. When others passed drills, Belial exceeded them. When the combat cages claimed blood, it was never his. The tutors noted his silence, his focus, his refusal to accept even minor flaws in his form. Chaplain Lamorak watched from a distance, and in time he came to test his pupil again. The second duel was not witnessed by lords and knights, but by grim-faced sergeants and data-recording servitors. Belial, now fully transformed by the gene-forging process, stood before the chaplain who had taken him from his world. They did not speak. This time, the duel lasted less than 60 seconds. Belial disarmed his old mentor and held his blade at Lamorak's throat. The chaplain smiled. "Well met, brother." Belial lowered his sword. He did not smile. He did not need to. He had already begun his path, not to glory, but to perfection. The Knight of the Ebonstar was dead. In his place stood something greater, a dark angel. The transformation from neophyte to space marine is not merely physical, it is spiritual. It is the death of self. Most recruits struggle to let go of their past. They cling to memories, to names, to homeworlds scorched behind them. But Belial did not look back. His home was war. His father had forged him for duty, and the Dark Angels had given that duty purpose. Now he would rise through the ranks of the First Legion, not as a prince, not as a knight, but as a warrior without flaw. After his initiation into the chapter proper, Belial was assigned to the Third Company. This was no honor placement, no laureled station. The Third had long been a proving ground, a crucible for new battle brothers, and a testbed for commanders seeking to distinguish themselves, the kind of place where reputations were either born or broken. Belial entered the Third with no titles and no fanfare, but he carried with him a reputation. His duels were whispered of in training halls. His precision on the battlefield drew attention from the company's sergeants. He did not rise quickly. He did not seek rank. But when opportunity came, he did not miss. It began during a compliance operation on the death world of Kark 17. The Third Company had been deployed to bring an imperial mining colony to heel, one that had inexplicably declared independence from the wider Imperium. At first, the mission was thought to be simple. Rebels, malcontents, nothing more. But Kark 17 was no mere insurrection. Beneath its ash-choked skies and rusting hive spires, something darker festered. The rebels were not just armed, they were organized. Doctrines mirrored those of the Astra Militarum. Weapons showed signs of forbidden manufacture, and more than once Vox intercepts carried the name of a long-forgotten deity. A name that turned the stomachs of even seasoned warriors. The word was Lorgar. The rebels were no rebels. They were traitors. descendants of the word-bearers, still licking their ancient wounds, still poisoning the Imperium with blasphemy. As soon as the nature of the foe became clear, the Third was ordered to enact a full purge. The streets ran red, the temples burned. And in the thick of the fighting, Belial proved what set him apart. In the chaos of the Hive's central cathedral, an ambush shattered the forward squad. 3 Marines downed in seconds, their Vox links silent. Belial, then a simple line battle brother, saw the kill zone and reacted. He moved not towards safety, but into the storm. Bolt rounds screamed past, grenades tore masonry apart. Still he charged. He moved without hesitation, without fear. In the heart of the ambush, he found the traitor's champion, once a noble Astartes, now clad in warped ceramite inscribed with unholy scripture. The word-bearer raised a demon-infused blade, a weapon that screamed in the mind as much as it tore through armor. Belial met it with his chainsword. He did not roar. He did not make vows or oaths. He simply fought. The duel was brief, 3 cuts, 1 feint, a finishing strike to the throat. The traitor fell without ceremony, and Belial stood amid the bodies of the fallen, his own and theirs. He did not speak. He simply reloaded his bolter and rejoined the line. This was what distinguished Belial. Not only his skill, but his silence, his refusal to treat war as glory. It was a task, a burden, and one he carried with an unshakable sense of duty. After Cork 17, Belial was promoted to sergeant. His squad became a reflection of his ideals. They spoke little. They drilled constantly. They reported the lowest incidence of errors in combat engagements across the entire Third Company. But perfection had its price. There was no leniency under Belial's command, no second chances. Every mistake was met not with punishment, but with expectation. His men would assign themselves additional training, hours of self-imposed penitence in the pain boxes or weapon cages. Belial never ordered it. He didn't need to. His example was enough. In one campaign against the Tau-aligned Xenos on the desert moon of Vel Varnak, his squad fought a series of precision strikes against armored hunter cadres. The Tau favored technology, long-range engagements, coordinated fire zones. Many Marine squads took casualties from the enemy's superior battlefield awareness. Not Belial's. His squad approached like ghosts, timed perfectly to the second. Every breach was mapped in advance, every enemy position triangulated with brutal efficiency. They advanced through dust and steel like the hand of the Emperor himself. Not one of his men was injured. Not a single round was wasted. Other squads asked how it was done. Belial answered with silence. His philosophy was not something that could be taught in words. It had to be lived. He was present at every briefing, but spoke only when needed. He offered corrections in tactics, but never condescension. His authority came not from rank, but from the weight of expectation he placed on himself. The men followed him because they trusted him to be better than they were, and because he demanded they become better than they had ever been. Among the Third Company's veterans, a saying emerged. If Belial nods, your work is flawless. If he frowns, you have much to learn. If he is silent, you have failed and do not yet realize it. He became the silent center of every storm. When other squads broke under pressure, his squad reformed the line. When commanders hesitated, his voice, calm and precise, offered plans born of cold logic and iron will. He did not seek recognition, but it found him. Within decades, his name was spoken in the halls of the inner circle. Rumors swirled that Belial was being considered for elevation, not for his martial excellence alone, but for the incorruptible character he carried like a blade. He had no weakness, no excess, no need for glory, only the mission. In private, Belial fasted often, not out of penance, but discipline. He would sometimes go days without sustenance beyond nutrient supplements, training his body and mind to function under duress. Chaplains reported that he spent more time in solitary prayer than any sergeant they had ever recorded, and not once did he ask for guidance, only forgiveness, for mistakes only he saw. On Tharsis Fief, when a fortress city fell to a demonic incursion, it was Belial who led the counter-assault into the warp-tainted core. He bore no relics, no sacred weapons, only a standard bolter, a chainsword, and his relentless resolve. His squad held against horrors that defied reason. They burned corruption from the chapel vaults with flamer and hymn. And when the city was retaken, Belial did not stay to bask in victory. He requested no commendation. He gave no speech. He boarded the Thunderhawk and began training his men before they reached orbit. This was Belial's path. Not a meteoric rise, but an unbroken ascent forged by consistency, control, and unrelenting personal scrutiny. By the time he was summoned to the command dais for reassignment, there was no doubt where he was headed. His actions had already elevated him in the eyes of his brothers, but more importantly, he had met his own standard, and for Belial, that was the only judgment that mattered. There is a moment in every warrior's life when the battlefield changes. No longer are you a sword in the hands of another. No longer are you the blade that answers to orders. Instead, the weight of command settles on your shoulders, and you must learn to wield the sword and the soldier both. For Belial, that moment came not in glory, but in fire. The world was Durga Princip, a shrine world lost in the sprawl of Segmentum Obscurus, where crumbling cathedrals reached for the stars and the prayers of the faithful echoed through ruined vaults. It was a world sanctified by martyrdom, and one that would demand more. The enemy was Furion. He was a warlord of the World Eaters, an ancient betrayer clad in blackened brass and madness. Where Furion walked, silence died. He led a black crusade not for conquest, not for power, but for slaughter. Every city he touched bled dry. Every temple became an altar of skulls. And now he had set his eyes on Durga Princip. The Dark Angels responded, as they always did, without fanfare, without flourish. The Third Company was dispatched under the command of Master Nadael, a cautious tactician and veteran of 3 centuries. Belial, then a senior sergeant, was tasked with securing the southeastern approach to the Temple of Saturnus, an ancient reliquary said to hold a shard of the Emperor's own armor. He made no protest. He never questioned his placement. Orders were a sacred right. As the Third Company made planetfall, Durga Princip burned. The skies were red with ash. The air tasted of iron and sorrow. The faithful lay butchered across their altars, their pleas unanswered. Furion's berserkers had already landed. The sound of chain axes chewing through stone echoed through the temples, and every moment lost meant another chapel defiled. Belial's squad moved with purpose. They established kill zones along the southern avenues, using the city's own collapsed statuary as barriers. Every line of sight was calculated, every angle of fire mapped. There was no rest, no respite. Belial knew what was coming. They arrived at dusk, the howling of warp-born rage carried on the wind. Khorne's chosen had come. The first wave struck like a hammer. Crimson-armored giants, once noble Astartes, now consumed by fury. Their eyes glowed with hatred, their chain blades roared with bloodlust. But they met a wall of disciplined fire. Belial's bolter barked in steady rhythm, each shot placed with surgical intent. One berserker's helm cracked open. Another fell as his arm was severed at the elbow by a storm of mass-reactive shells. Belial gave no war cry. He did not raise his voice. He issued his commands with cold efficiency, each phrase delivered through vox like scripture. Left flank, tighten spacing. Load Kraken rounds, prioritize juggernauts. Kill, move, reload, repeat. For hours they held, and when the berserkers withdrew, they did not flee in fear. They simply regrouped for the next charge. Elsewhere, Master Nadiel moved to reinforce the central causeway. He led from the front, as all true Dark Angels do. But the enemy was cunning. A feint on the western approach lured Nadiel's command squad into a kill box. What followed was chaos. The Vox crackled with distress signals. One voice, Nadiel's, shouted a final order before cutting out. The line went silent. Command was broken. In the seconds that followed, every squad of the Third Company awaited the next voice, the next direction, the next anchor. It was Belial who stepped into the void. His voice came through the Vox with absolute calm. "This is Sergeant Belial. I am assuming command. All squads converge on fallback position Theta 3. Execute reinforcement grid Gamma. No deviation." There was no debate, no questioning of authority. Belial's name carried weight, and his tone carried certainty. The scattered squads reformed under his direction. What could have been collapse became cohesion. Tactical units moved as one. Fire teams shifted and covered one another with practiced precision. Belial's squad, though weary and bloodied, now served as the core of a reformed line. The enemy returned at nightfall. Furion himself came with them. The warlord was a vision of madness, 8 feet of muscle and armor, festooned with skulls, his chain axe wreathed in warp fire. He bellowed a challenge to the Emperor, to the Lion, to any who would dare meet him. And Belial answered. There was no ceremony, no monologue. Belial moved through the battlefield like a hunter, flanking the charging World Eaters as they surged toward the reliquary steps. He ordered melta charges placed along the flanking walls. He baited the traitors into the trap. At the moment of detonation, the avenue became a furnace. Fire consumed a dozen berserkers. Rubble crushed 6 more. Amid the smoke and flame, Belial advanced. Furion saw him and roared. They met in the courtyard beneath the shattered wings of a stone angel, locked in a duel that echoed with fury and silence. Furion's axe came down like a meteor, carving through air and smashing aside rubble. Belial met it with parries that seemed impossibly fast, his power sword flickering in counterpoint. For every savage blow, there was a measured response. For every howl, a moment of absolute quiet. The battle was not equal. Furion was stronger. His blows fractured stone. He drove Belial back step by step. But Belial studied him. He waited. He endured. Then the opening came. A missed stroke, a fraction too slow. Belial slid inside Furion's guard, drove his blade up through the warlord's gut, and fired 2 bolter rounds point blank into his heart. Furion stumbled, tried to rise. Belial stepped forward and ended it with a clean, merciless thrust through the throat. The battlefield went silent, and then the tide turned. The berserkers, disoriented by the death of their leader, fell into disarray. The Third Company advanced, pressing every advantage. By morning, the enemy was broken. The Temple of Saturnus stood scarred, but untouched. When the survivors returned to the rock, Belial did not speak of his actions. He did not claim victory. He filed his reports, debriefed his squads, and returned to the training cages. But the inner circle had already spoken. Belial's calm under fire, his refusal to falter, his slaying of a chaos warlord in single combat, his ability to seize command when others fell. It was not ambition, it was purpose. The title of master was bestowed without ceremony. Only Azrael himself spoke the words. Belial accepted with a single nod. No speech, no boast, only a vow. He would not lead for glory. He would lead because it was necessary, because someone must hold the line when the angels fall. And in that vow, the lion stirred. It was the sky that spoke first, a low, grumbling thunder that was not weather, but war. Green fire streaked through the heavens of Piscina 4, tearing through atmosphere like spears hurled by angry gods. They came in crude craft, shaped like axes and fists falling from the void with one singular intent: destruction. Ah, Gazkul had come. For the Dark Angels, Piscina 4 was more than a war zone. It was a sacred charge, a planet under their protection, a bastion of imperial faith, and a recruiting world from which the chapter had drawn countless warriors across centuries. It could not fall. The Greenskins did not share that sentiment. They descended in uncountable numbers: rocks, dropships, teleporters, crude landers, all vomiting out orcs by the thousands. Not the disorganized rabble of common orc warbands, but an organized, strategized invasion, the hallmark of one warboss alone: Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, and alongside him the cunning mech warlord Nazdreg Ug Urdgrub. The Imperium had underestimated their ambition. What was thought to be a raid quickly bloomed into an all-out assault. PDF lines crumbled. Astra Militarum regiments were overrun. Only the bastion at Cadillus Harbor remained standing, a fortress city built into the cliffs above the sea, its spires laced with gun batteries and promise. Into this furnace stepped Master Belial. He came not as a savior, but as a scalpel. The Third Company made planetfall in coordinated waves. Thunderhawks screamed through smoke-choked skies. Drop pods punched into city squares. Belial's arrival was not grand, it was clinical. He disembarked with his command squad into a landing zone still wet with orc blood and broken promethium barrels. His boots struck the ferrocrete. His eyes scanned the carnage. He spoke one word: anchor. Within hours, the Third had established a command nexus inside the harbor's central manufactorum. Servitors converted assembly lines into ammunition foundries. Tactical squads reinforced the perimeter. Belial, clad in his armor of bone and green, took no rest. He did not wait for backup. He did not rely on hope. He prepared for siege. The orcs obliged. They came with drums of war booming from guttural throats and ramshackle loudspeakers. Their mobs filled the valleys. Their armored columns rumbled through the jungles. Cadillus trembled as gargants, immense orc walkers the size of hab blocks, lumbered into range, belching smoke and fire. Belial answered with precision. He repositioned the harbor's macro cannons to target approach vectors the orcs didn't even know they were creating. He funneled enemy forces into streets rigged with multi-layered detonation zones. Every orc that reached the walls died in crossfire. Those that scaled them were met by Belial's blade personally. He led from the front. As always, in the refinery district where fuel stores had been seized by the Greenskins, Belial led a midnight strike. Clad in Terminator armor, he and a squad of Deathwing veterans teleported directly into the heart of the orc-held facility. They emerged in a flash of ozone and thunder, bolt rounds detonating before the Greenskins even registered the change in air pressure. The fight was brutal, cramped corridors, flame and blood. Belial carved a path through burner boys and knobs alike, his sword never halting, never stuttering. He moved with purpose, cutting down an orc warboss with a series of blows so fast that onlookers swore it was a single strike. By dawn, the fuel stores were theirs again. The orc advance on the southern wall stalled. For a moment, the city breathed, but Gazkul was not done. He unleashed the heart of his strategy, the teleportus. Crude yet effective, the devices drew power from a captured plasma reactor outside the city. With its energy, the orcs could beam in reinforcements straight into the harbor's core, bypassing walls, barricades, and kill zones. The first wave struck like a lightning storm. Orcs began appearing inside the command center itself. A mech with a burner pack materialized mid-transmission, incinerating a tech marine before he could scream. Belial, without hesitation, lunged and decapitated the creature before the corpse hit the floor. He knew what must be done. The plasma reactor had to be retaken, at all costs. He led the assault himself. No backup, no hesitation. The third company mobilized, pushing through narrow city alleys now swarming with greenskins. Every step forward was paid for in blood. Belial directed the assault with absolute clarity, shifting squads as if moving pieces on a grand chessboard. A flanking attempt by a Kill Crucia tank was thwarted when Belial detonated a pre-laid minefield with a single Vox command. They reached the reactor as it spewed arcs of unstable energy into the sky. The ground shook. The air was thick with radiation, and at the heart of it all stood Gazg-Kul Thraka. The Orc warlord was a mountain of green muscle and iron. He moved like a freight train, armored like a god of violence. His bellow could shatter glass. Belial engaged him directly. It was a duel not of technique, but endurance. Gazg-Kul struck with a power claw the size of a dreadnought's chest. Every blow cracked the ground. Belial dodged, deflected, struck back. His sword of silence cut deep, green ichor spilling across sacred stone. But Gazg-Kul laughed and struck. The blow hit Belial's chest like a meteor. His armor cracked, bone shattered. The Grand Master flew across the courtyard and collided with a fallen reactor conduit. For a moment he did not rise. The city held its breath. The orcs surged forward, but Belial lived. Bleeding, broken, he rose on one knee, then to his feet. His voice crackled through the Vox. Fall back to Inner Redoubt. Burn the outer district. Orbital cannons spoke. The outer quarter of Cadillus was sacrificed in fire. Thousands of orcs died. The reactor was lost. The teleporter surged with unstable power, but became unusable in the chaos. Gazg-Kul withdrew. It was a stalemate. The city stood, but barely. Belial was carried from the battlefield, his armor blackened, his organs failing. Apothecaries worked for hours. He lingered near death for days. But he survived. When Azrael arrived with reinforcements, he found the city intact, and the third company bloodied but unbroken. The orcs had not taken Cadillus. The chapter still held Piscina 4. Belial, swathed in bandages and supported by cybernetic braces, stood to receive the Supreme Grand Master. Azrael asked no questions. He merely handed him a relic, the Sword of Silence passed from master to master across generations. Belial took it with one hand, and with that, the Deathwing knew its future, not forged in titles, but in flame, in fury, in the silence that followed. There are truths within the Dark Angels that are not whispered, even in prayer. Truths that live behind sealed gates and ciphered doors, behind locked lips and the hooded eyes of the chaplains. There is a core to the First Legion wrapped in silence deeper than any void, buried so far beneath duty and faith that only a chosen few are permitted to approach it. To be chosen is not an honor, it is a burden. And Belial was chosen. His ascension to Grand Master of the Deathwing came not with celebration, but with the extinguishing of candles and the slow turning of ancient keys. One by one, the robed watchers of the inner circle led him through the darkened depths of the rock, down into the catacombs where even the air seemed to hesitate. He said nothing. He asked nothing. Questions, after all, are for those unready for answers. The room was round, its walls carved with the names of warriors, long turned to dust. The scent of incense and solemnity clung to the air like mourning shrouds. At the center stood the Supreme Grand Master himself, Azrael. Beside him, Chaplain Asmodai, face hidden behind his iron skull mask. They welcomed Belial with nods, not words, and then, one by one, they began to speak of truth. Not the truth of battlefield statistics or strategic deployments, but the truth of the fall, the truth of Caliban, of Luther, of the fallen. He stood unmoving as they spoke of treachery older than many planets, of brothers turned to traitors, not in the distant future, but in the dawn of the Imperium itself. How the Sons of the Lion had fractured, not all marching to Horus' call, but instead splintering in secret rebellion. How Luther, once closest to the Primarch, had led half the Legion into damnation, not to worship the ruinous powers, but to reject the Imperium's truth. The war had not ended at Terra, it had ended on Caliban. And in that ending, everything the Dark Angels once were was shattered, along with their homeworld. And so began a curse of silence, a brotherhood of secrecy, an eternal crusade not against the galaxy's enemies, but against their own fallen kin. Belial did not blink. He had suspected much. The signs were always there, hidden operations, strange rituals, prisoners who were never named nor seen again. He had heard tales of shadowed chambers where screams were prayer and redemption was extracted in blood. Now he understood, and he accepted. That very night, Belial took the oaths of the inner circle. Kneeling before the blade of the Lion's judgment, he swore to uphold the secret war, to lead not only the Deathwing in battle, but in the sacred hunt that bound the Unforgiven together. The Deathwing, after all, were not just the first company. They were the executioners of penance. The bone-white armor they wore was not a symbol of glory. It was a shroud. The next morning, Belial stood at the head of the Deathwing for the first time as Grand Master. There was no speech, only orders, because there was work to do. The fallen do not gather in legions. They do not wage open war. They hide. They whisper in the dark corners of the galaxy, sowing doubt, infiltrating cults, gathering forbidden lore like magpies collecting bones. Many are unaware of their own past. Some have forgotten the heresy itself. Others remember every moment and revel in it. To find one is to find a ghost. To capture one is to grip smoke. That became Belial's task. His blade would no longer serve only in open battle. It now hunted shadows. The Raven Wing would find the trail, the fast and the furious, scouring planets and intercepting rumors, acting on whispers of green-armored angels seen in forbidden temples or deep within warp-shrouded void hulks. And when the trail was confirmed, when the prey was cornered, then came the Deathwing. Then came Belial. On the forge moon of Polanax, the Deathwing executed a boarding action that would have been declared suicidal by any other force. The moon's surface was a tangled mess of orbital platforms and derelict warships, half-fused by millennia of decay. It had become a heretical shrine to something old, something hungry, but within it a signal had been found. The voice of a former interrogator chaplain, a fallen. Belial gave the order personally, no astropathic request for permission. No pause. He led 3 squads of Deathwing Terminators through a teleport breach into the hollow heart of the shrine. It was not a battle. It was a purge. Every hallway lit by fire. Every corrupted servo skull shattered under iron boots. Belial moved like vengeance incarnate, striking down cult leaders and demon hosts alike with the sword of silence. When they reached the inner sanctum, they found their target kneeling before a statue of the Emperor, his armor still marked with the icon of the First Legion. He looked up and smiled. "Too late," he said. The trap triggered. Demon engines unfolded from hidden alcoves, screeching their rage. The walls bled. The world screamed. Belial raised his blade and did what he always did. Calculated, controlled, absolute. With his brothers, he tore through the Xeno spawn and traitor tech until the floor was slick with oil and ichor. At the end, he approached the fallen and offered him two choices: confession or death. The traitor chose silence, and so did Belial. He did not strike him down. He rendered him unconscious and had him transported to the rock. There, others would finish what he began. Years passed. The hunt continued. Every time a whisper was confirmed, the Deathwing moved. No heralds, no records. Just a flash of teleportation, the roar of bolters, and then silence again. Belial waged this war with the same precision he brought to every battlefield. But now his enemies were not merely alien or demon. They were brothers. In this he did not hesitate. He did not hate them, but he would never forgive them. For each one still at large was a wound in the soul of the chapter, and Belial had never tolerated wounds to go unhealed. There are those who call the Dark Angels secretive, others say paranoid. Few understand the cost of knowledge, the weight of betrayal. The endless, silent war fought not across star systems, but within hearts. Belial understands, and he bears that weight not with pride, but with purpose. For he knows the truth, and he will carry it to his grave. There are places even the Adeptus Astartes tread with caution, hulks of old ships drifting through the void like the corpses of forgotten wars, too ancient to chart, too vast to destroy. Among these phantoms was a place known as Charnel Shrine, a space hulk of massive scale, cobbled together from derelicts spanning millennia, half-warped and echoing with things no longer living, but not yet dead. Most would have avoided it. Belial went inside. He did not go alone. The Deathwing had been dispatched to cleanse the hulk after reports filtered through the Inquisition's deepest channels, sightings of ancient armor, bone-white helms, the torn remnants of First Legion heraldry. It wasn't the Xenos presence that concerned the Dark Angels. It was the possibility. A fallen, or worse, many. At the time, Belial was still new to the mantle of Deathwing Grand Master. He had worn the armor, carried the sword, sworn the vows. But the burden of commanding the First Company was still heavy upon his shoulders, and Charnel Shrine would be the proving ground. The hulk drifted on the edge of the Ciceran expanse, barely registering on long-range scans until it bloomed into view like a wound in space. 1,000 hulls fused together, cathedrals twisted into barracks, orc fortresses wrapped around ancient Imperial cruisers. No one knew how it had formed. Perhaps it was drawn together by the gravity of nightmares. Inside, it festered. The orcs had claimed the upper decks. A full warband, complete with their own hangars and mechs, was building weapons from the scrap. But they were not alone. Below the surface, deeper than even they dared go, something older had nested. Genestealers, thousands. And so the mission came to Belial. Two enemies, both unaware of each other, trapped in a space hulk the size of a small moon. The challenge was as clear as it was suicidal. Cleanse both threats. Alone. No aid from other companies, no astropathic call for support. Only the Deathwing. The Thunderhawks launched without ceremony. Terminators clad in bone armor stood in silence as they descended through the void, shields at the ready, storm bolters prepped. Their presence did not require announcement. Where they arrived, death followed. The initial teleport strike embedded Belial and his strike force in the center of an old ecclesiarchy vessel, now twisted into the core of the hulk. Statues of saints lay toppled. Candles still burned, fed by warp flame. A smell of blood and rust lingered in the halls. No prayers were said, only orders. Belial split the force immediately, squads moving in formation to herd the enemies toward each other. He understood instinctively what had to be done, weaponize the Xenos against each other. The orcs were loud. The Genestealers were hungry. If timed right, one would bleed the other before the hammer fell. Within hours, the plan began to unfold. A Deathwing squad lured an Orc patrol into an old cryo chamber where Genestealer scent still clung to the walls. When the Orcs laughed and fired their shooters into the dark, they awoke the swarm. Screams followed. Not Orc screams. Genestealer. A perfect, shrieking ambush. Belial watched from a hololith aboard the strike cruiser Torment Unending, noting the kill ratios, mapping the swarm patterns. He directed his forces like a sculptor guiding a blade through marble. Every squad became a chisel, carving away layers of enemies until the survivors were desperate, isolated, and unaware they were being corralled. He struck next in the Orc heart. Leading from the front, Belial teleported directly into a mech hall where crude machines belched smoke and half-built killer cans shuddered on greased platforms. The Orcs barely had time to roar before Belial's squad opened fire. Storm bolters shredded metal and flesh alike. Power fists pulped greenskin heads. And Belial, he was a blur of exact motion, a blur of bone and death. He fought without roar or taunt. His silence was deafening. He found the mech boss and split his skull with a single strike. When the last Orc fell, the Deathwing planted melta-bombs on the mech shop's reactors. Belial gave the order, detonate. The resulting explosion shook the entire hulk. Charnel Shrine groaned as fire coursed through its steel veins. Now the Orcs believed the Genestealers had turned on them with new weapons. Now the Genestealers were drawn to the scent of Orc blood, and so the two armies met, deep in the lower levels. For 3 days, the Deathwing watched and waited. The battles were apocalyptic. Genestealers slashed through mobs of boys. Orcs retaliated with sheer numbers and brute strength. The death toll climbed into the thousands. Belial let them bleed. And then, when both were spent, he struck. A full-scale assault. Teleporters flared like divine judgment. Squads deployed across the Hulk's spine. Choke points sealed. Avenues collapsed behind force barriers. And in the center of the carnage stood Belial, directing the death blow. He led his knights into the heart of the Genestealer lair, beneath the bones of a dead battleship where a broodlord waited. The creature was vast, intelligent, more beast than mindless drone. It sensed the threat Belial posed. It came at him like a storm. They clashed in the dark. Its claws could cut ceramite. Its strength could bend adamantium. But Belial did not yield. He ducked. He pivoted. He struck. The Sword of Silence sang once and took the creature's head. In orbit, the Tech Marines reactivated the core reactor of the old Ecclesiarch vessel. The Deathwing pulled out via teleport. Belial gave the command. The charnel shrine died in fire. The explosion was visible for 1,000 kilometers. Wreckage scattered into the void. No Orcs remained. No Genestealers crawled free. Only silence. Back aboard the Rock, Belial did not boast. He requested no commendation. He simply ordered that the names of the fallen be added to the Stone of Remembrance. The Deathwing had been bloodied, but victorious. And Belial had proven, beyond doubt, that he was not just a master of the battlefield. He was a master of strategy, of control, of patience. The Hulk was gone, but its echo remained in the oaths spoken that night. Oaths to cleanse all corruption. Oaths to hunt the fallen without pause. Oaths to wear the bone-white armor not as a symbol of prestige, but as a reminder that death, like silence, comes without warning. And Belial would bring both. There are two shadows in the Dark Angels chapter that move independently, but never apart. One is the Raven Wing, swift, relentless, black as void. The hunters, the scouts, the eyes in the dark. They strike like lightning, then vanish before the smoke clears. The other is the Deathwing, unyielding, implacable, bone-white giants that descend like tombstones from the sky. They do not chase, they do not run. They end what others begin. And between these two, a bond has formed stronger than steel, forged not in doctrine or ceremony, but in shared purpose, in silence, in blood. At the heart of this unspoken alliance were two men: Samael, Grand Master of the Raven Wing, commander of black bikes and screaming jet bikes, a warrior of instinct and fury; and Belial, Grand Master of the Deathwing, a fortress clad in ceramite, a strategist who struck with a surgeon's calm precision. Fire and stone, fury and silence, yet between them, understanding. Their partnership began in the shattered spires of Caspian V, a hive moon brought to madness by a psyker cult claiming to hear the voice of the lion returned. At first it was dismissed, a typical heresy, common in the wake of warp storms. But then the names began to surface. Names too old, names only the Unforgiven would know. A fallen angel had been there, a former librarian of the First Legion, one who had seen the fall, fled the lion, and now posed as a prophet to the lost. Samael found the trail first, of course. He always did. The Raven Wing descended in a storm of black fire, their jet bikes weaving through narrow alleyways, speeders cutting through the smog-choked skies. Samael himself rode at the front, blade drawn, eyes locked on the ghost of a signal buried in the planet's network. They hunted the fallen like a hound sniffing through rubble. He was close, too close, and then the trap snapped shut. Dozens of cultists, their minds broken by warp-tainted scripture, surged from beneath the hive's foundations. Old ventilation shafts, forgotten trainways, and maintenance ducts became arteries of the cult's rebirth. The Raven Wing, scattered and overextended, found themselves entangled in a net they could not cut fast enough. Samael's voice, sharp as a thundercrack, rang out over the vox. "Belial, markers down. We need the hammer." That was all it took. No further explanation, no excuses, no delay. The Deathwing came without warning. One moment, the cultists screamed in triumph. The next, the heavens bled blue light as Terminators teleported directly into the crumbling spires. Storm bolters roared, cyclone missile launchers blanketed the skyline with fire. And at the heart of it, Belial walked forward without a word, his blade cutting down heretics as if he were simply clearing the path of weeds. The cult collapsed, the trap reversed. Within hours, the Raven Wing were clear, the network of tunnels burned out, and the cathedral at the heart of the heresy stood in smoldering ruins. And the fallen, gone. A second too early, a door closed just before it could be breached. But what remained behind was undeniable proof. Data slates encoded with ciphered records only a son of Caliban would know. DNA traces matching archived records of pre-heresy command staff. A discarded pauldron, painted green and black, the winged sword symbol now half melted. It was not a failure. It was a message. And Belial did not forget messages. From that moment on, the twin blades of the Unforgiven moved in concert. The Raven Wing rode ahead, sniffing out heresy, false flags, half-whispers of green-armored ghosts, and the Deathwing followed not with curiosity, but with judgment. On Darakos, it was the Raven Wing who cornered a group of fallen masquerading as inquisitorial agents. Samael's speeders boxed them into a collapsed spire. He called for Belial, who came with a detachment of knights, bearing storm shields and relic blades. Within the hour, the impostors were disarmed, shackled, and shipped back to the rock. Their screams never left the vaults. On Qasir Delta, it was Belial who suggested surrounding an entire PDF headquarters suspected of housing a disguised fallen commander. He advised Samael to let them flee, predicting the impostor would break cover and attempt escape through a forgotten transit route. Samael smirked but complied. Belial was right. The fallen ran. Samael was waiting. The two Grand Masters met at the corpse, Samael tossing the severed hand of the traitor to Belial with a sardonic grin. "Next time," he said, "you take the lead." Belial didn't smile, but he kept the hand for study. Despite their differences, Samael and Belial never argued. Not really. Their discussions were vigorous. Tactical debates often ended with Samael leaning over a hololith, gesturing wildly, while Belial calmly redrew the assault vectors with a stylus. Sometimes they disagreed. Samael favored rapid insertion, fluid tactics, and adapting on the fly. Belial favored planning, control, and layered contingencies, but they always agreed on the final goal: find the fallen. Bring them back, alive if possible, dead if necessary, redeemed if the Emperor willed it. Their methods differed. Their purpose never did. There was, however, one operation that nearly shattered them both. It happened on Valafar, a dying Forge world overrun by demonic incursion. The planet had once served as a staging ground for several Dark Angels campaigns. It held secrets, old caches, lost archives. Now it burned. But that wasn't why they came. The signal had been traced back to him. Marbas, one of the oldest Fallen still known to exist, once a captain of the First Legion, now a demon-warped monstrosity, half man, half lion, crowned in horns and rage. He had escaped before. He would not again. Samael struck first, his raven wing engaging the traitor's cultists in a scorched canyon. Speeders flared. Black bikes roared across broken magma fields, but Marbas did not fight his way out. He went for Samael. The Fallen had become a demon prince in full, a creature of muscle and madness, his voice like cracking bones, his claws as long as chain swords. He caught Samael mid-charge, tearing him from his saddle and lifting him into the air like a rag doll. Death loomed, and then Belial arrived. He did not speak. He did not shout. He simply drove the sword of silence into the demon's wrist, severing claw from arm in a flash of holy light. Marbas howled, dropped Samael, and vanished, wounded, furious, but not dead. Again he escaped, but this time he bled. And Belial never forgets a scent. After the extraction, Samael sat in the Medicae, one arm broken, ribs cracked, half his armor fused to his side. He looked at Belial and muttered, "You're late." Belial replied flatly, "You're reckless." They didn't laugh. They didn't need to. They had each other's backs. That was enough. The blade and the wheel. They became more than just Grand Masters. They became a balance, a force, a pattern repeated across dozens of systems. Samael would find, Belial would end, Samael would chase, Belial would stand over and over. Neither sought recognition, neither asked for credit. They only asked, again and again, "Where is the next?" The hunt never stopped, and between their boots and bolters, the Fallen began to disappear. One by one, dragged screaming into the dark, praying to forgotten saints that could not save them. Because when the Raven Wing comes for you, the Deathwing is never far behind. Some victories feel like failure, not because of what was lost, but because of what was missed, that final grasp at the collar of destiny, the heartbeat between triumph and regret. For Belial, it was not his own life that haunted him. It was a shadow draped in a hooded cloak, and the name no Dark Angels spoke without heat behind their eyes. Cypher. He had been a myth once, a whisper in the void, a bogeyman invented by chaplains to keep young Astartes sharp in their duties. But myth had a face, and that face wore the remnants of the First Legion's heraldry like a shroud of scorn. Cypher was real. He had walked the same halls as the Lion. He had held rank in the days before the fall. And now, 10,000 years later, he moved through the galaxy like a ghost, pursued by the Unforgiven with a fervor bordering on madness. Every time the Dark Angels came close, he vanished. Every time a fallen was interrogated, his name surfaced like a scar that refused to heal. Belial had never seen him. Until Piscina. Years had passed since the battle at Cadillac Harbor. The city had been rebuilt. The scars of Gazkul's siege had faded into the polished stone of new monuments. But the memory remained, etched into Belial's bones, his sternum still held together by cybernetic reinforcements. A quiet reminder that the line had nearly broken. He was returning not as a savior this time, but as a hunter. It began with an intercepted transmission, scrambled, distorted, and dangerously old. A fragment of encrypted speech, half erased by time. They still wear the green. They still believe he's coming back. That voice. The Tech Marines couldn't verify it. The signal was ancient. The location, near the edge of the hive sprawl on Piscina's eastern range, was marked as barren. Belial didn't wait. He deployed 2 Deathwing squads by Thunderhawk under cover of darkness. No orbital strikes, no warning shots. Just the quiet hum of engines and the weight of absolute certainty. This was the moment. This was Cypher. The cathedral ruins at the edge of the waste stood like a broken crown against the starlit sky. Once a shrine to the Emperor's angels, now it was a hollow shell, its stained glass long since shattered, its altar scorched and empty. The walls bore inscriptions in High Gothic, and something older, scratched over top in a hand Belial recognized instantly. Calibanite script. He moved through the entrance like a blade sliding into a scabbard. Not rushing, not hesitating. Deathwing veterans followed in a diamond formation, stormbolters scanning every crevice, auspexes pinging with quiet unease. Then they saw him. Alone. Standing in the nave, back turned, staring up at the remains of a once magnificent mural, the Emperor, flanked by his angels. Cypher. His cloak was weathered, edges frayed like parchment left too long in the sun. His armor was an archaic patchwork, Mark 6 plates beneath a robe of deep emerald, a bolt pistol holstered at one hip, a plasma pistol at the other. And across his back, sheathed, untouched, a sword. A sword none had seen drawn, a sword that some claimed should not exist. Belial raised a hand. The Deathwing halted. He stepped forward, each footfall echoing like a war drum through the ruined temple. He did not shout. He did not demand surrender. "Turn around," Belial said. Cypher did, and smiled. It was not a sneer nor a grin of defiance. It was familiarity. "You look like him," Cypher said softly. Belial ignored the bait. "You are under arrest, by the will of the Lion, by the authority of the Unforgiven." Cypher's hand twitched toward his pistol. Belial took a single step closer. "Draw it, and you die." Cypher's smile widened just slightly. "That's what the last one said." Then the Vox clicked. A Deathwing voice, urgent, confused. "Contact, multiple, warp signatures, West Wing, cultists, too many to count." The trap had been sprung. From the ruins surrounding the cathedral, fanatics emerged. Not soldiers, not even traitor Astartes. Just humans, madmen, their bodies daubed in green and black paint, chanting in tongues long dead. They carried blades made from scrap, autoguns held together by faith and rust. They weren't there to protect Cypher. They were there to delay. Belial turned his head for the briefest second. Cypher moved. He didn't draw his pistols. He didn't strike. He simply vanished, like smoke in a storm. By the time Belial turned back, the cathedral was empty. The back wall had collapsed, deliberately sabotaged, likely hours before. Belial chased through the breach, boots thudding against ancient stone, but the trail was already fading. Warp masking, concealment fields, and a teleporter trace only detectable after it was too late. Gone. Again. Another chase, another moment, another failure. But not quite. Cypher had left something behind. At the foot of the altar where he had been standing rested a scroll case, old, cracked, bearing the seal of the librarius. Inside, a page, handwritten, ink still fresh. The lion sleeps beneath the rock. When he wakes, tell him I kept it safe. Belial said nothing as he read it. His gauntlet tightened around the parchment, and then slowly, carefully, he tucked it away into a sealed compartment in his armor. The cultists were dispatched in minutes. The ruins were purged with plasma fire. Nothing remained but scorched stone and ash. But Belial did not leave the planet for 2 more days. He searched, he scanned, he watched the stars, and in the quiet, with his men withdrawn, he knelt where Cypher had stood and placed a gauntleted hand on the cracked marble floor. "I will find you," he whispered. No oath, no threat, just fact. Because Belial did not forget the ones who escaped. He learned from them. And when next they met, there would be no cultists, no ruinous distractions, no half measures. Only silence and the sword. War defines the dark angels, but shame refines them. No other chapter bears a burden quite like theirs. No other warriors wear armor that remembers sins older than living memory. But even in the silence of the Deathwing, even in the still discipline of Grand Master Belial, there are moments when the past doesn't merely haunt, it strikes. The world was Xanthera, a planet of slate-gray oceans and toxic air, locked in orbit around a dim, dying star. A minor industrial colony once, now abandoned and quarantined by the Inquisition, for reasons buried under layers of redacted text. No official channels spoke of Xanthera anymore, but the Dark Angels had their own channels. The signal came not from astropaths or Vox intercepts, but from a dying man. A knight of the Raven Wing, barely conscious, his body torn open by warp-born claws, retrieved from the edge of a shattered warp storm. He was delirious, barely able to speak. But he said one thing clearly. "Brother, he wore our colors." That was all Belial needed. No council was summoned, no debate held. The Deathwing mobilized in silence. Xanthera was dead to the Imperium, but it was alive to the Fallen. The initial scans were worse than expected. The planet had become a graveyard of blackened manufactorums and overgrown spires, wrapped in endless storms of poison rain. But at the center stood a tower, massive, obsidian, untouched by time. A signal pulsed from within, layered in encryption known only to the First Legion. A beacon, a trap. Belial deployed with 5 squads of Terminators, a pair of dreadnoughts, and no reinforcements. He brought no orbital fire support. If the Fallen were there, fire would not retrieve them. Only steel, only truth. The drop was uneventful. The storm parted just enough for their descent. Thunderhawks landed with muted grav cushions on the broken concourse of what was once a refinery hub. The atmosphere chewed at the ceramite, but the Deathwing endured. They always endured. Belial advanced on foot, leading from the front. Each squad moved with surgical timing, sweep, secure, advance. No shots fired, no enemy in sight, but they felt it. A presence, something watching. Inside the tower, the truth waited. The entrance opened at their approach, automatically, as if expecting them. The interior was pristine. Ancient Calibanite stonework met Imperial cogitator panels, all still functional, all untouched by the warp's rot. It was impossible, which meant it was deliberate. A voice crackled through the Vox, filtered through half-corrupted encryption. "You came then. I hoped you would." Belial did not respond. He signaled for a secure advance, his men fanning out as they moved deeper into the heart of the tower. The architecture was familiar, too familiar. Belial had seen these patterns in the archives beneath the rock. This was no copy. This was authentic. It was a relic of Caliban, not a fortress, a refuge, and at its center, waiting in a vaulted sanctum lit by flickering lumen braziers, stood a warrior clad in green. The armor was Mark III, burnished by age and repair, trimmed in gold. The winged sword of the First Legion was painted across the chest plate, unbroken. A hood covered his face, but the aura was unmistakable. This was not a madman or a heretic. This was a leader. He stepped forward, arms wide, unarmed. "Welcome home, brothers," he said. The Deathwing raised their weapons. Belial stepped into the light. "Name," he said, voice like a hammer on stone. The hood was lowered, and the face that stared back was familiar. His name was Ezekor, once a captain of the 23rd Order during the Great Crusade, a tactician and orator. Officially, he had died in the Horus heresy. Unofficially, he had disappeared after the fall of Caliban. He had fallen, but he didn't bear the madness most did. He looked whole, calm, sane. And then he said the words that would echo through Belial's mind for years. "We did not betray the lion. The lion betrayed us." The Deathwing readied their weapons. Belial raised a hand. "Speak." Ezekor's tale was madness, or truth. He spoke of secret orders before Caliban's fall, of conflicting directives from the lion himself, of warriors told to stay behind, not to join the loyalists, but to wait, of how those left behind had watched their world die, their Primarch unleashing orbital fire on the surface of their homeworld, killing brother and traitor alike. "We were not traitors," he said, stepping closer. "We were abandoned." Belial listened. That was his curse. He listened. Ezekor claimed the tower had been constructed before the fall, hidden from both the Imperium and Luther's rebels, a place for those who could not choose, who would not fire on their brothers, who refused to kneel to the Emperor, but refused the War Master's path as well. "You hunt the fallen," Ezekor said, "but you never asked why we fell." Belial said nothing, but something in him stirred. Not doubt, rage, because he had spent his life ensuring that duty triumphed over temptation, that the mission was always worth more than the question. And yet here stood a ghost, claiming his damnation was not born of sin, but of confusion. "I offer you something, Grand Master," Ezekor said finally. "A record, our story, proof. Let the lion judge me when he wakes. Until then, let us not murder each other for a misunderstanding." He extended a data core, heavy, ancient. Belial took it. He did not speak. He gave the order. The Deathwing restrained Ezekor, bound him in chains of adamantium. "We'll see if confession survives interrogation," he said coldly. As the Thunderhawks lifted off, carrying prisoner and data alike, Belial sat alone in the darkness of the extraction chamber. He stared at the data core. He wanted it to be false. He needed it to be false. Because if Ezekor was telling the truth, then every brother he had executed, every fallen dragged screaming into the vaults of the rock, might not have been a traitor. They might have been loyal to the lion, to their oaths. And perhaps even now, Belial was the one who had fallen. But duty drowned out doubt. He would carry this question with him. But he would not let it slow his hand. The Deathwing would continue their hunt. The fallen would still be judged. And Belial would still be the sword, even if one day it must turn against its own past. Beneath the void, under the indifferent light of dying suns, there are battles fought in silence. No grand proclamations, no banners fluttering in vacuum winds, just the hiss of pressure seals and the echo of boots on plasteel, as warriors carry out a duty so old it has long since become penance. Belial, Grand Master of the Deathwing, knew such battles intimately. But there was one siege that would stretch even his resolve, one conflict that would demand not just his strength, but his certainty. It began with a 0, a fragment of code retrieved from a long-abandoned astropathic station orbiting the dead world of Cythera 5. Decades earlier, the Dark Angels had attempted to cleanse the station after reports of psychic anomalies and Xenos interference. The structure was believed destroyed. But something survived, a single pulse, a data burst so heavily encrypted it took the chapter's librarians weeks to crack. When they did, they found an embedded symbol, a sword crossed with a broken halo, a mark once used by the First Legion, by those who vanished, the Fallen. Belial said nothing when he received the report. He only requested immediate control of the operation and invoked the absolute authority granted to him as master of the Deathwing. No outside support, no inquisitorial notification, no delay. He would finish this personally. The mission was named Nightmantle. He deployed with the full strength of 2 Deathwing strike forces, including Contemptor Dreadnought Brother Ephraim, whose sarcophagus still bore scars from the Rangdan xenocides. Their destination, the ruined orbital fortress known as Halon Spire. Once a proud bastion of the Imperium's exploration fleets, it had been lost in the early years of M36 during the Nova Wound incident, swallowed by warp tides and declared unfit for recovery. But the coordinates embedded in the cipher matched the derelict's final known position, now drifting just beyond the halo of a dying blue dwarf, cloaked in radiation and silence. The Thunderhawks approached through storms of dust and static. Auspec's readings fluctuated. Vox comms dropped into a whining drone. But Belial remained still, eyes fixed on the target growing in the void ahead. Halon Spire was a corpse. Its hull was half torn by gravitational tides, metal peeled like skin from bone, antennae hung limp and twisted. But something inside was still alive. Power flickered behind broken windows, pressure fields held weakly across open gaps. This was no ruin. This was a tomb with its doors cracked open. The Deathwing breached at 3 points simultaneously, each entry a calculated thrust. No shock and awe, just clean, cold infiltration. Storm bolters ready, blades primed. They encountered nothing at first. No resistance, only dead servitors and dust-choked corridors still lined with the sigils of the Emperor's name. And another, a name older than heresy, a name long scratched from records, Luther. Belial walked through those halls like a man retracing another's dream. The architecture was imperial, but altered, repaired in places by hands that still remembered Caliban. Symbols of loyalty fused with runes of exile. At first it was faint, then it became unmistakable. This was a sanctuary, a secret one. Deeper into the station, Belial's squads found makeshift chapels, hidden bunkers, data crypts still functioning. Records that matched known war zones of the heresy, but annotated with corrections. Reports of battles won by the Fallen, defending human worlds against chaos incursions. Not spreading heresy, not seeking revenge, fighting for the Imperium. From the outside. And then they found the defenses, automated plasma turrets, void-shielded servitors wired directly into the floor, ancient sentry bots bearing sigils of Caliban's nightly orders, long extinct. They activated as soon as the Deathwing crossed the outer sanctum. The siege began. In silence. For 39 hours, Belial's forces moved chamber to chamber, purging machines designed to kill Astartes, dodging fields of null gravity and kill zones lined with old war tech. These weren't traps set by madmen. They were defensive measures, tactical, purposeful. Belial began to see the truth. This was no hideout. This was a redoubt, built for defense, and only a brother would know how. Finally, they reached the heart of the station, a vast auditorium beneath a collapsed stasis array. There, standing before a pulpit carved from Dark Age alloys, was a figure in ancient green armor, unmasked, unbowed. His voice rang out before the Deathwing could fire. "I am not your enemy, Belial." He used his name, not title, not rank, but name. The man's armor bore the insignia of the First Legion. His tabard was marked with ancient High Gothic prayers to the Emperor, not the gods of chaos. His right arm was cybernetic, clearly rebuilt, and his chestplate bore a crude but unmistakable aquila. He raised no weapon. "I fought beside your Primarch," he said. "I bled for Caliban, and I was left behind." The moment hung heavy. Belial raised his bolter. "You are a traitor," he said, steady. The man didn't flinch. "I am a survivor." He identified himself as Seraphan, once a watchmaster of the Order Hectalion, a loyalist detachment on Caliban during the final days of the heresy. When the Lion unleashed the guns of orbit, Seraphan had refused both Luther's call and the retreating orders of his fellow captains. He had stayed, protecting what few civilians remained from the madness of both sides. He had witnessed the rift and been caught in it, flung into the warp for centuries. When he emerged, the Imperium had forgotten him, hunted him. So he built his own truth, gathering other strays, building sanctuaries in the dark, not as a rebel, but as a guardian of what the Imperium had abandoned. "Have you never wondered, Grandmaster," he asked quietly, "if all the fallen truly fell?" Belial did not answer. He signaled his men. The Deathwing moved forward. Seraphan did not resist. He knelt, not in surrender, in faith. "To the Lion," he said, "I give myself." They bound him in chains sanctified by Chaplain Asmodai himself. On the return flight, Belial stared at Seraphan across the gunmetal deck. The prisoner held his head high. No venom, no pride, only silence. The same silence Belial had known all his life. The siege had been a success, the traitor captured, the facility destroyed. But somewhere deep in Belial's soul, a storm churned. What if the line between loyalty and heresy had never been clear? What if the sword he carried, so proud, so precise, had cut down not just the damned, but the faithful who were simply forgotten? The stars outside blinked cold and indifferent, and Belial, Grand Master of the Deathwing, sat motionless, not questioning his duty, but mourning what it might cost. There are enemies that announce themselves with fire and fury, orcs with their booming war cries, demons with screaming storms. Even the traitor legions make themselves known with symbols of dread and the stink of heresy. But there are foes worse than any of these, foes who wear the face of brothers, who bear the same icons, who speak the same prayers, and who still raise their weapons against you. For Belial, the most dangerous battles were never the loudest. They were the quiet ones, the wars behind closed doors, the choices made in whispers. And one such battle unfolded not on a distant battlefield, but within the sanctified halls of the rock itself. It began with a name, Brother Barakiel, a veteran of the Deathwing, a warrior who had served for nearly 4 centuries without flaw. His record was a tapestry of valor, fought on Armageddon, cleansed Tyranid infestations on Cronus, led the breach on the cursed world of Fenris IV when the Great Devourer returned, steady, quiet, devout, and now accused, not by an outsider, by a fellow interrogator chaplain. The charges were delivered in private to the inner circle. Treason, communication with a known fallen. Worse, sympathy. Belial sat in the Hall of Stone, flanked by the Grand Masters of the Raven Wing and Librarius, as the chaplains presented their findings. Vox recordings, cryptic symbols found carved into Barakiel's quarters, Personal journals, heavily redacted, where the brother questioned elements of Caliban's fall. Fragments of recovered transmissions, suggesting a link to the fugitive known only as Cafen, a notorious fallen who once held command under Luther himself. It was not conclusive, but it was enough. And so the ritual began. They did not call it a trial. There were no lawyers, no defense, only questions and answers and pain. Belial did not relish the process. He did not voice objection, but he was present for every moment. That was his duty, not just as commander of the Deathwing, but as a member of the inner circle. If their blade was to be absolute, it had to be wielded with full knowledge. Belial was brought in chains, his armor stripped, his body marked with the runes of examination. He did not scream. He did not beg. He knelt before the council and lowered his head. And when asked, "Are you a traitor to the Lion?" he answered not with silence or denial, but with a question of his own. What if the Lion was wrong? The chamber fell silent. It was not the first time someone had uttered heresy within those walls, but it was the first time Belial felt it. Not as a curse or a rebellion, but as a wound. Deep, honest, unhealed. The chaplains pressed him, demanded answers, pushed deeper, both through interrogation and psychic scourging. Librarians sifted his memories, searching for signs of warp, corruption, or demonic influence. They found none. No dark power, no madness, just doubt. Belial had not betrayed them. He had lost faith, and for a dark angel, that was nearly worse. Belial listened as the brother spoke in chains, his voice hoarse and broken. He spoke of centuries of bloodshed, of interrogations where even the guilty wept for mercy, of fallen who confessed sins, only to reveal they had done so out of despair, not conviction, of prisoners who died insisting they had been loyal and only fled because they had been fired upon by their own kin. "I followed every order," Belial said. "I killed without question. I buried the cries of my brothers beneath duty. But the more I listened, the more I watched. Something in me cracked. If we are right, why must we hide it in the dark? Why must we bury the truth beneath stone?" No one answered, because everyone knew. The Lion had disappeared. Luther had rebelled. The Dark Angels had split. And for 10,000 years they had hidden that truth from the Imperium. Every battle, every purge, every oath whispered in blood and secrecy, to preserve their honor, to protect the memory of what they once were. But at what cost? Belial's voice turned quiet. "I do not serve chaos. I do not reject the Emperor. But I believe some of the fallen did not fall. And if that is heresy, then perhaps we have become the thing we claim to hunt." Belial stared at the man who had once fought at his side, who had saved his life during the siege of Praxios, who had trained half the Terminators now serving in his company. And he spoke for the first time. "Would you let them go? These fallen? Would you free them?" Belial did not hesitate. Number I would face them, but I would listen first. Belial looked to the chaplains. Their faces were stone. To the librarians, their silence was louder than thunder. The vote was taken. 3 votes for absolution, 4 for silence. Final silence, the kind that does not end. The execution took place the next morning in the Chapel of Blades. Belial wore the robes of the penitents. He did not struggle. He did not look away as Belial raised the sword of silence. No words were spoken, no rites recited. The blade fell, and it was done. Belial walked alone that evening, deep into the labyrinthine halls of the rock. He moved past archives, reliquaries, gene vaults, down into the lower catacombs where statues of long-dead heroes stood with blind eyes, carved in armor of ancient design. He stopped at a sealed vault, its sigil faded, its designation struck from the records. Inside were data slates recovered from Halonspire, the testimonies of Seraphan, the records of a possible truth, the things Barakiel had seen. He stared at the lock. He did not open it. Not yet. Instead, he knelt before the vault and whispered the only prayer he knew that held meaning now. Not a prayer to the Emperor, not a prayer to the Lion, a vow. I will not forget, I will not falter, but I will know. Because Belial had delivered judgment, and now he needed to be sure it had been just. The Deathwing would march again. They would hunt the fallen. They would do their duty. But one day, perhaps, they would answer for it. And when that day came, Belial swore he would be ready, not as a weapon, but as a man, one who had seen doubt and still chosen truth, even if that truth was buried in dust and flame. It is a truth long spoken among the unforgiven. The past does not rest. It hunts, it howls, it burns in the eyes of every Deathwing brother, glows in the coals of every flame-lit chapel aboard the Rock. For the Dark Angels, history is not just memory. It is debt, unpaid, unforgotten, unburied. But sometimes the past reaches back and calls your name. Belial had known war in every form, cleansing Xenos hives in choking jungles, breaching void ships at the edge of reality, standing alone before heretic champions, wielding demon blades. But nothing had prepared him for the call that came not from the battlefield, but from the Vault of Silence, a sanctum hidden beneath the rock, sealed for over 10,000 years. It opened by itself. No key, no order. Just the sound of a lock disengaging, long rusted into silence, now hissing open like a wound reopening. The librarians called it impossible. The tech marines ran diagnostics on every mechanism in the vault structure. No evidence of sabotage, no warp presence, no psychic pressure. Only a name, logged in a forgotten dialect of Calibanite script on the inner lock plate. El Johnson, the Lion. The Primarch lost. The father returned. No official word had spread yet. Azrael had ordered silence as surely as the tombs demanded reverence. But word has its own wings, and in quiet corners of the rock, some already knew. Belial knew, and when the summons came to him, he felt it before he read it. The weight of destiny written in ink and ceremony. You are summoned to the Lion. He had never expected to hear those words. Not truly. The Lion was legend, spoken of in stories too sacred to be written down, his sword said to still burn with the light of Imperium Secundus, his presence so mighty that even his absence carried the weight of command. Now he was awake, alive, and waiting. The chamber was high and vaulted, lined with towering statues of the First Legion's greatest heroes, Luther, Cypher, Zahariel, and El Johnson himself, all of them cast in polished black stone, silent witnesses to a meeting beyond measure. The Lion stood at the end of the chamber, not sitting, not resting, standing. In armor forged anew by Archmagos Dominus Belisarius' cowl, silver-trimmed and radiant, but still shaped in the old ways. His face was weathered but unchanged, handsome in a severe, noble way, with hair like a storm cloud and eyes like a blade yet drawn. Belial entered and removed his helm. He said nothing. The Lion studied him in silence and then spoke with a voice that seemed older than the stars. You wear my name well, Grand Master. Belial bowed his head but did not kneel. I serve. The Lion nodded. You have hunted my brothers. Yes. And judged them. Yes. And executed them. Belial didn't flinch. Where judgment was passed, yes. There was no anger in the Primarch's face, no approval either, only thought. You believe yourself just? I believe myself necessary. A long silence followed. The Lion moved slowly toward him, every step echoing with the weight of centuries. Have you ever met one of the fallen, he asked, Who spoke the truth? Belial hesitated for the first time in decades. I have heard confessions. I have heard lies. I have heard doubt. And what do you think they saw when they looked at me? The lion asked. A god, a tyrant, a brother? I do not know, Belial said, but you judge them anyway. I judge their actions. The lion stopped, standing mere feet from him. His presence was oppressive, not by force, but by gravity, as though history itself pulled toward him. You have done well, Belial. I do not say this to flatter you. I say it because I have read your record, watched the recordings, heard your voice echoed in the chambers of the inner circle. You are a blade forged by necessity. Belial did not reply. He could feel the words not just pressing against him, but cutting. But blades can dull, the lion continued. They can shatter, or worse, they can be turned. He turned and gestured toward a smaller chamber beyond a veil of hanging chains. Come. Belial followed without question. Inside was a circular room, and at its center a massive slab of stone, a relic of Caliban scorched by orbital fire, covered in script etched by hand. Names, thousands of names, warriors, traitors, fallen. And at the center, freshly added, was one more, Belial. He stared at it, not understanding. The lion's voice came softly. You are not a traitor, Grand Master. You are not condemned. But you stand now where I once stood, uncertain if your judgment is justice or revenge. I have never served my ego, Belial said, only my purpose. Then consider this your next one. The lion handed him a data slate. It was not encrypted, not secret. It bore orders, a crusade, a mission sanctioned not by the inner circle, nor by the lords of Terra, but by the Primarch himself. To gather, to confront, to offer. Some of the fallen, said the lion, were broken, some deceived, some beyond saving, but some might yet be healed. I do not wish to erase the past, Belial, but I will not allow it to consume the future. Belial felt the blade of old duty press against the new. Mercy, he asked, barely able to make the word feel right. No, said the lion. Redemption. There it was, a new kind of war, not to punish, but to return. Belial closed the data slate. He felt the weight settle into his hands, a burden greater than any battlefield, a path more dangerous than any siege. A war not just for victory, but for truth. He bowed, not in obedience, but in understanding. I will serve, he said again. But this time there was something different in the words. Conviction, yes, but also hope. As he turned to leave, the lion called after him. When you face them, remember this. I do not ask you to forgive them. Belial paused. I ask you to forgive yourself. The doors sealed behind him. The future was already moving. And for the first time in centuries, Belial walked forward, not just as a weapon, but as a son. The lion had returned, and judgment would no longer come in silence alone.